The calendar is going to be made up of as a table. And we're going to put that table right here inside this div. And it will go completely in there. But we're not going to write it in the HTML file. We're actually going to create it in the JavaScript file. So if you go into the script file under the calendar.js, we're going to write all of the code for creating that table in this file. And there's a few things that we're going to need. We're going to need a date that displays in the calendar. So here, create the date. And this will really be the current date. And we're going to start with it with a set date, and then we'll change it eventually to a current date. So we're going to do a variable for this. So do var and call it this day and set it equal to a new date object. And we're going to just start with it being equal to August 24th, 2018. And that's straight out of the textbook. That's the date that was used in the textbook. So we'll match that for now. And then we want to fill up that div. So, right, we want to add code or add the table inside the div. Now you'll notice my comments are a little bit different than the ones in the textbook. You can use whichever one you want. And to do that, we need to get that div. And remember that we do that with document.getElementById. That's one way to get a unique item, a unique element. And we need to do that, we actually need the ID of it. So if we go look in the HTML, that ID is calendar, right? And so that's what we want. We want that ID calendar, and that will give us that div. So we get that element, that div element, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set the inner HTML, right? And remember that the inner HTML will replace everything between the beginning and ending of the element, the beginning and ending tags of the element. So it will put whatever we add to there inside, right between the opening and closing tags. So we'll use inner HTML, okay? And we want to set that equal to, and so this is an interesting way to organize that. Let me just put an empty string here, and let's work on what we're going to set that equal to. So what we're going to do is create a function that generates the calendar, or the table, right? Generates the table. The calendar table. Okay, so we're going to generate that and return it. And it's all going to be a string, right? When we write HTML, those tags, the content, they're all just text, right? And so we're going to do that. We're going to create the text for that. So this is going to be a function. You start with the keyword function, and we're going to call it create calendar. And then it's going to need one parameter, and that parameter is going to be a date, because we need to know which is the current date. So we'll just say the parameter, send us the calendar date. And so we'll just call that cal date as an abbreviation. And then inside here, we're going to create this string that is going to be the table. And we'll call this calendar HTML. And we're going to start it, and this is how we build the calendar, right? We can make the string actually be HTML code. So table is just plain text, right? Equals. And now remember when we do IDs, so let's just look at this example. When we do a tag, when we do IDs, we put quotes around the value. And so we want to replicate that here, but if we say ID equals and we put a quote here, it's going to end that string, because here's the opening quote and there would be considered the closing quote. So one thing that we can do is to use single quotes instead. And remember that when we have a single quote, it won't end a string that starts with a double quote. So we'll start and end the strings with double quotes, and then if we need a quote inside, we can use a single quote. And now we want to give the table an ID of calendar underscore table. And that's the ID for that. Oh, I didn't spell calendar right. You have to be careful. You have to spell everything right, or you have to spell it incorrectly the same every time. Either way works. And that's what we want let's see, and then we need to close that opening tag. Oops, nope, sorry, yep. So that's part of the string, and then the double quote and a semicolon. Okay, so that gets us started. That's the opening quote, or the opening table tag. And for right now, we're going to add the closing table tag because we don't have any content yet, but let's just get started with the opening tag and the closing. But we're going to be putting things in the middle, so we don't want to put it right here at the end. So we'll have another line where we'll do that. And that closing tag, what we're going to do is we're going to take this calendar ID, or a calendar HTML, remember that's a string, and we're going to add to it. Right? And we're going to use the plus equal assignment operator. What that plus equal will do is it'll say, take what's currently in calendar HTML, add this new thing to it, and then store it back into calendar HTML. And that's what that plus assignment, how it works. So now we just simply want to add in this string, we're going to add the closing table tag. So now notice what that string has. That string starts with this, right? Calendar HTML starts with this, and then we say add this to it and store the result back in calendar HTML. So now calendar HTML has the opening tag with the ID and the closing tag. And then all we simply need to do is return that. So return the calendar HTML. And we're just returning that string. So now we can use this function. So what it's going to do is it's going to generate the table code and return it as a string. And so we can use that string then to fill up that div. So right here, all we're going to do is we're going to call that function. So instead of sending it a string that we generate, we're going to call the function create calendar. And create calendar will return a string, and then that string will be used to replace the inner HTML of that calendar div. All right, we need to send it a date, right? It needs one argument to match that parameter, and we're going to send it this date. Sorry, this day. All right, so there what we've done is create that very beginning table. And let's see if we can see that. So if we refresh here, nothing's showing up. It's just an empty table, so we're not seeing anything in the page yet. But we've got things set up to build that table.